bird on a tree. I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see. From up here, the world seems small. We can sit together. It's so beautiful, you and me.
Hi everyone, this is Monica Ramirez, Warrior of Love, and you are in Soul Talk. And we really appreciate your presence here. And we have a very special guest. His name is George Leoniak. And I would like to tell you a little bit who he is, because it is very, very interesting, this conversation that we're going to have with him. George, thank you for accepting my invitation, and thank you for being here. Please tell us a little bit more about who you are and what do you do.
Yeah, thanks, Monica, for having me. It's great to be on Soul Talk and meet you. Yes, my background is started off as a wildlife tracker. I've been teaching animal tracking and bringing people in the woods about nature observation and learning about wildlife, plants and animals around their neighborhood. And I've been doing that for about 25 years. And I've had this strong interest while I've been doing that is patterns, seeing patterns in nature, recognizing patterns, seeing spirals, seeing plant growth and the way the leaves, flowers, animal tracks. And sacred geometry has kind of been a new thing that's developed for me over about 5 years, a strong interest in drawing the different patterns and diving into the mystery, which seems like a never-ending mystery with the sacred geometry. So that's some of my main passion and interests that I have right now. So I share both of those skill sets that I have now.
What did make you start? Let me start with the animal tracker, because that sounds very interesting. Mm-hmm. That what makes you start? Where are you at first? You're in Vermont, or where you are?
Yep, I'm in Vermont. So we've got a lot of snow out here. So that's a great substrate for tracking animals in the wintertime. So, or sandy desert places are also great too. But yeah, I'm in Vermont.
Because the tracks, obviously. Yeah. But what are the uses of animal tracking?
Well, it's varied based on what people's interests are. If you look at our, evolutionary history, depending on what story you want to follow, but if we go way, way back in our history, we come from hunter-gatherer societies, or hunter-gatherer societies still exist in many parts of the country, and they're using tracking all the time for their basic living and subsistence needs. So some of it for them may have been for hunting, may have been for ways of tracking weather patterns, of where to move, things like that. Tracking is much bigger than just wildlife and studying animals. It's kind of a way of being, developing an awareness. And I'd say a lot of people who come to me are less interested in the hunting element of things and more into the awareness of how to observe more, how to participate more with their surroundings, how to feel connected with, outside of the four walls that they're normally in, and expand their awareness to the lives of other animals and just put them more in connection with nature.
After I asked that question, I started thinking like, well, it's because I am not a hunter. That's probably, and you just answered that. Yes. Sorry, yeah. That was a question from a non-hunter person. That's me. Yeah. I grew up more in the coast. I'm from the south, Veracruz, Mexico, and we're in the fishing part more than hunting. And but now going to the sacred geometry, that's been one of my passions since a long time ago as an artist. And I see that actually I was seeing your website and also your YouTube videos that you're doing amazing work in sacred geometry. And it is, yes, and it's so beautiful that you can find it everywhere and in anything if we actually really observe. And but when did that passion started for you? That because not everybody can see, they observe, but they don't observe. And when that passion started for you?
Well, I mean, when I got into tracking about 25 years ago, there was a book that got me kind of interested in it called Voices of the First Day. It was called The Aboriginal Awakening in the Dreamtime. This was about the Australian Aboriginals, and there was a lot of tracking in that book. But book was written by Robert Lawler, and Robert Lawler also wrote another book called Sacred Geometry. And it's one of the best textbooks on sacred geometry. So, back in my 19, 20-year-old, I got both those books at the same time. So I actually kind of studied both. I just happened to really get interested in the animal tracking, but I've always had a passion for that pattern recognition and pattern observation. So when I kind of made the switch from the animal tracking over towards more interest in sacred geometry, it was a perfect fit, because all those observation skills that tracking taught, looking for details, looking at a complex picture of multiple patterns and all over and finding a pattern within that, that's what I've been doing with tracking all the time. And really engaging with the mystery of it, and asking questions and being curious and like following it like a trail. And as you follow that trail, more of the mystery gets revealed as you go further down the path. So I'd say it's really like a mindset that developed with the tracking.
I can see that. You're teaching them basically how to observe.
Yeah.
Like an artist, you don't, like I always tell my students, you learn how not to be the judgment, remove the judgment from there, because it's not pretty or ugly, it just is. It's the lights and the shadows and the forms and so forth that what you're learning to observe is removing the judgment, because that's what it gets us stuck into our personal growth, in fact.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, one of my great tracking mentors, Charles Worsham, teacher, he was a visual artist, fantastic artist. And one of the main things he worked with, which he called primary vision, but he used the artist language of looking at texture, shape, line, value, color. And he'd have us go out and look at a leaf and just walk us through that meditation of each of those components. And that really enhanced that observation skill and get our mind out of the way and just move into what he called the primary vision, rather than thinking what it is you're looking at. Let it just reveal itself based on all those patterns.
Yes, I can see that. And I was seeing also the colors are involved, because I was seeing the color wheel in some of the pieces that you were doing. Yeah. And I thought, oh wow, this is very, very, very interesting, because the color wheel, it means a lot of things for many people. Of course, for artists, it's just a color wheel. That it is very important, but in this, we're going to the sacred part of the color wheel. That's when it makes it more interesting. Can you explain a little bit more? How do you use it in the sacred geometry, the color wheel?
That's a really interesting question, because you're actually touching on part of one of the places where is like the most mystery for me, because I didn't realize for many, many years, probably till I was about 25, that I'm red-green colorblind. So and just the other day, I was looking at those random dot, color patterns where they say you'll see the number and everything. And it was like comparing to, someone else, I was like seeing completely different patterns there, because I was looking at different things. So I don't actually know what my color selection looks like, probably to, 90% of the population, what they're seeing when I look at it, when they look at it. But I am attracted to the red that I see, and the blues and the yellows together in those combinations, and the oranges and the greens. I tend to like to focus on those primary rainbow colors, although I don't believe I see them like everybody else does. So that's been an interesting kind of mystery for me in this process.
Well, the majority of the people, as an art teacher, when they see, okay, you're gonna paint a tree, it's like, oh, it's green. Yes, but there are thousands of shades of green.
Yeah.
A tree is not only one shade of green, or nothing is only one shade. There is a variety that probably we can't even count it. How many shades we have of one simple color.
Yeah.
But that also goes in vibration, and it goes also in energy,
Mm.
depending on the vibration and depending on the color. And that's where you change everything, what
Mm.
we're observing. But not we're not used to it. No one teaches to, not even to our ancestors, to actually really observe the shades or the forms that now that is that's the complex of the sacred geometry.
I think you're right with that. Is like because I didn't have a prominent of just selecting colors based on the colors I knew. I've probably always had a natural tendency to look for the value in difference between shades. So if I go berry picking looking for strawberries, they don't just pop out red, bam, there they are. Like other people just there's a straw. I have to really like look into the green and find the shaded difference. And I'm constantly doing that. So by using the value, and I think it's really helped with the observation skills because I've had to work a little harder at it and rely less on color and more on the textures and shapes, the other information that's there that can actually maybe sometimes be lost if we just focus on, well, that's the color, that's, bam, that's what it is. There's other information maybe that I focus on in there.
In the sacred geometry, I would like to know what is their use for. Can you explain us a little bit more of the use for, practical use for? Because it is everywhere, wherever we look, wherever we observe, it is there. But what is the use for?
Well, I guess I mean there's a lot of ways you can address that question. I guess from a personal, practical use as an individual, what does it mean to me? For one, it's pleasing to, you can meditate with it. You can use it as a mandala, to focus your attention and awareness on. That's a great way to interact with it. But I would say, really, once you start to apply yourself with learning the techniques of the drawing, then you're really starting to experience it. And that's a meditation in and of itself. So it's another type of like maybe art therapy. Some people would do art just to kind of relax or calm down or learn more about themselves. You can do the sacred geometry in that way, and also leading to get to know more about yourself, like how much of a perfectionist or how much is perfection important to you when you're doing sacred geometry, and does your circle match up, and like can you keep going if it's not matched up? It brings up that introspection, to learn more about oneself. So I see that all as a part of self-inquiry and meditation that can kind of come hand in hand. And I believe that is very practical in a well-being point of view, from self-awareness and well-being.
A while back, I studied the numbers and also the different sides. Like let's say the number two, you write it down like this, but also if you fold it, it have like a butterfly effect.
Mm-hmm.
But also if you turn it in the other side, it have a different form. But all of them are at the same time too, because everything it is in all the four sides,
Yeah.
or like the natives they call it the four, not the four elements, the four directions.
Yeah.
And that has to do also with the sacred geometry, that one that you create and you observe. The numbers are involved in there.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, the numbers are a large part of the sacred geometry, more so than I really recognized in the beginning. I mean, I have a background with Native American philosophy. When you're into tracking, it sort of somehow comes hand in hand with understanding more of Native teachers. And I've spent time with different Native teachers, done ceremonies along the way, and the four directions and the medicine wheel concept and tradition was very much probably some of my first real conscious introduction in sacred geometry in a way that put me into the medicine wheel in a context that connected me well out beyond my little sphere, of me. When you start talking about the directions and recognizing that direction has an energy and that it's related to, a time of day, and it's related to animals, and it's related, all these connections that are connected through that. I know you were asking about numbers there. I kind of went into the medicine wheel, but yes, numbers are very much associated with that. I just thought I'd bring in the connection to the directions, as you mentioned there, for just a second.
Yes, and the meaning of each number is actually, it have different meanings. Like the number two is a lot of the transformation, according to the the American Indians. Well, not only America, all the Indians actually. I come from from the south, from Mexico, and we use it also over there. Like number two or number three or all the numbers, they have a different meaning. But when you're doing sacred geometry, I always have asked when I do it, is the triangle have a different meaning that a square, or the circle has a different meaning that the sphere, or things like that? That is applied for also for the science of sacred geometry?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, you can, and this is what I've read and, different things that I've listened to along the way. You have to feel into these yourself too. I think that's the important thing, is to always take these concepts of different numbers and then look at a square and does that really represent matter, or earth, having the square is just very structural sound. The fire, the tetrahedron, or the triangular shape, relating to the fire. Well, so the sphere, related to spirit, the universal oneness and wholeness. So yeah, sacred geometry are the five and the pentacle, relating to phi ratio and life. The hexagon may be more oriented towards like a technological build, or, maybe very structured in order, like bees, with their hexagonal structures that they make for their hives. So all those have different energies, and then you'll see those patterns in nature, and then they're constantly communicating to you. Like every flower has a different petal structure, and right there you have a different feeling and energy that flower is giving you based on those petal arrangement that it has, that may be associated with a number.
And the beautiful part is, like, it's outside is also inside. That's the number one, or metaphysical. So how is here, it was one of the laws of metaphysics. That is, how is here is over there. So how we see it in the minor scale in a flower, it is also in the same universe and also inside of us.
Right.
The microcosmos and the microcosmos. This is so interesting.
Yes, well, that's the classic "as above, so below" statement, and I think sacred geometry is really getting you into seeing through that lens, because when you're drawing this little structure of 6 circles around one, for instance, and you start connecting the lines, and you realize, well, there's atomic structures that have that same type of makeup, and then you could bring that out to more biological scale, and then you can look at that even through a universal scale. So it really is a great entryway into that contemplation that you can have personally with the drawing. And then there's so much literature and research that one can then follow up on those questions to find out more information.
Does a figure that you do, it depends on something that the spectator is observing, or is the artist that is creating it? It have a different meaning, one or the other.
Okay, yeah, just describe that one more time for me. I like this question. I just want to make sure I understand it fully.
There is always 2 points of views. One is the artist creating a piece, and the other one is the spectator observing the piece. Or it have the same meaning for both of them, from the observer or the artist that created. Like the piece you have in the background. Like the piece you have in the background, I am observing that piece, and it can have a meaning for me and so forth. But for the artist that created the piece, it might have a different meaning, completely different meaning than for me that I am observing it. Or is the same meaning?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, you might. It depends how much of the tradition is associated to what's behind me. You know, that came from a tradition, so there may be things in that tradition that if you don't know that tradition, there might be different meanings associated with it. You might have a certain feeling that comes to it, and maybe if you talk to someone from that tradition, they might be like, "Oh yeah, well that's kind of what we were trying to capture in that." So I guess that's the beauty of the creations, is just to have all the different perspectives that different perceivers can bring to it, you know, and that not one particular view or angle of seeing it has to be the correct interpretation, you know, that there can be multiple perspectives and conversations around it. Although there might have been very well an intent of the artist of what they wanted to convey, or at least what it conveyed to them. But then you put it out there, and then it can mean something for everybody. And I think that's the joy of it too, is just to see all the interpretations that may come up from your piece that you've created.
That question I had it as an artist every time I exhibit, and they ask me, okay, what are you trying? Explain me your piece, and I am not so particular in explaining my pieces because it might have a different interpretation for the viewer than for me that I created the piece. And it might help them in different ways in their subconscious or whatever they were needing to hear or see and observe. That for me, when I was creating it, the piece,
Mm-hmm.
and that take me to my question is, do you channel?
I don't say that I would try to specifically tap into trying to channel in any way. You know, I get into a state where everything is just in relationship to what it is, where the separation between observer and observed, let's just say, really becomes a very narrow, you know, disintegrates, that I'm so absorbed within this that when I look back at what I've been doing, I'll have to try and reinterpret it with the logical mind, you know, to say what is this here that I've been working with. There's sometimes just so much information that comes in with sacred geometry for me, because I'm always on the, you know, new things are always being revealed to me, so it's always a mystery of what's coming through. So you know, it's like you get this download of information, let's just call it, and then it's how do you articulate that. So I don't put emphasis on the where the source of it comes from, because I believe it comes from universal source anyway, from not just one particular entity, let's just say, but just a universal feel. But then you have to bring it back down and, you know, manifest it in some way. And that's what the sacred geometry or the polyhedra forms that I make, you know, the different, you know, little geometric structures, you know, you work with these things and you try to articulate it. So some may call that a form of channeling. I just don't put a lot of emphasis on that, because that means so many things to different people, you know, in terms of what a channel means.
Yeah, but sometimes it's messages, a lot of messages, not necessarily only for us, it's for the humanity. I am a channeler. So sometimes the message, okay, I don't understand it. Let me try to digest it, like you were saying. You receive the download, it's like, let me try to figure it out, how I'm going to explain this one, or understand it first myself, and so I can give it to give the message for the rest of the people that it's not only mine.
Yeah.
And that applies for the sacred geometry.
Yes, well, very much so for me. I mean, I think some of the work that I'm doing with it feels much bigger than my own little universe, you know, of what I'm working with. I mean, I try to articulate this material, share it. There's some very unique finds in relationship to the flower of life pattern, and adding 5 circles to it, and making some, you know, little adjustments in our field of sacred geometry in relationship to those forms. So it feels very purposeful for me and very much in alignment with a greater sense of purpose and mission around some of the work that I'm doing with this. No,
That
it
was
doesn't seem like it's a self-centered, self-driven mission that I want to get this done. It's just the information's coming and I need to share it.
that is a great video, guys. That you should check it out about the flower of life that George did. That I highly recommend it to you. You have to see it, guys. It was a really good video. I love it. The one you sent me.
Oh, great! Thanks. I'm glad you saw that one. I have to remember which one that was I sent you. Was it the interview? Flower of Life blossoming in the new era, maybe? Yes,
Yes.
that was the recent lecture that I gave on that one. Oh, great. I'm glad you liked that.
Yes, it was really really nice because I always drawing and doodling, and doing always, even if I'm watching the TV, I'm drawing, and that's how I actually do it. And it was very very interesting to see that.
Oh, great. I'm happy to hear that. I really would love for more people to check that out because I think there's some really neat upgrades, in our sacred geometry language that are contained within that material.
Yes, and how people can take class. What are you teaching your classes that you have a school where you teach both animal tracking and sacred geometry? How do you teach those to people?
Yes. Well, the animal tracking is really just in person outside in the woods. And, majority of people who do that are, live locally near me. And I have an apprenticeship where I have 8 weekends out of the month where I've been taking people out and working with them and honing their observation skills. And then I recently started for the sacred geometry side of things, an online apprenticeship, which is 8 weeks. My next one is coming up in March. I just completed my first 8 week session of that ending in December. And that was spectacular. I had 4 great women in that program, and I've never taught sacred geometry online. And the platform worked really, really well. And, it was really exciting to show up each week and share new drawings and then see the artists producing beautiful work. These are beginners. Some of them are beginners. They've never drawn before at all. Some have been into it for a while. And each of them really gaining something new from what I was sharing with them and producing some great work throughout the whole time. So that was really rewarding. So that's at my new geometry, KNEW geometry, and at newgeometry.space apprenticeship if you're interested in that.
Yes, I will put the description in your links in the description of this video, so like that people can look for you.
Oh, thank you.
I was wondering right now, just crossing my mind, that the people that have OCD, that everything has to do, or certain grades of OCD. My daughter is actually always a perfectionist. And when I'm doing something, Mom, it's not completely symmetrical. You have to do it more symmetrical. And we're always arguing in that. But when you're doing sacred geometry, you have to be more symmetrical that even drawing a face. Because as human beings, we're not symmetrical. We have a smaller eye and then the other side and so forth. But in the sacred geometry, it is symmetrical, not like human beings that we're not.
Yes, it is. It definitely works with strong symmetry in that, but that's where you can break that symmetry and break those rules and get more creative and change your size of your circles and, do other things with it and still produce really interesting pieces that are meaningful. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I've seen some real breakthroughs with people just in my short time of teaching the sacred geometry who are either too concerned about making a mistake or just overly driven to be super perfect, and how both those people kind of find a happy medium of what really works for them and kind of releasing those certain tendencies that they grab onto. And so I find it to be very transformative and healing at those levels.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Because like that, they would not, well, breaking the perfectionism that's also get us stuck in so many ways, in so many levels, or many people are afraid to do anything because it's not perfect,
Yeah.
and that's what it sometimes it get us stuck. And that's one of the how do you call it? I just the word when we sabotage ourselves, it is part of it.
Yeah.
Where the perfectionism.
Yes, totally. And it's such a block, for people taking the step to try something new, because you already might have told yourself, I can do that, because it won't be perfect. But, then all of a sudden you're missing out on an opportunity. So, I do drawings on an iPad sometimes that are just 100% as perfect as they'll ever be. Every line lines up. And as soon as I go to the hand draw that, as soon as the pen or the compass hits the paper and I do my first circle and do the second circle, it's already, it may look pretty good. It's already not as perfect as what that computer did. And then as you add another circle and you add another circle, they're getting a little bit more off here and there, and you're making little adjustments. It's still coming out. It's looking pretty good, but it's definitely not perfect because I could show you the perfect computer one and you might think it looks perfect, but it's definitely not perfect, but it's good enough. And it gave you that sense of joy and relaxation. And you learn about yourself for those tendencies. And I think that's a real key that I'd like to highlight more and more in the sacred geometry, because then it's really a tool for transformation, personal transformation, when the right questions are asked and they lead to those self-discoveries of how that same tendency shows up in so many other areas of our life that we might not be aware of, or that we are aware of, but we don't really want to take a look at it. But this little simple act of doing this drawing all of a sudden points it out to you right away, and you got to deal with it because you're sitting there with that piece of paper, and now that's your teacher.
That is true. And I know there's many patterns over patterns, and also that's how teach us about dimensions. And do you, in your animal tracking, being in the nature and observing the sacred geometry in the nature, have you find that the portals of different dimensions?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of experiences that will happen to people over the time once they start to really give their heart and mind to any particular endeavor that's of a spiritual nature. That could be yoga. For me, I did the tracking. It was a very spiritually oriented progress of interest. The sacred geometry, when it's done with that intent, different experiences and different things will open up, different modes of perception, extrasensory. The dream time really opens up, energetic experiences can start to happen that are on frequency and vibration types of levels through your body, and part of that is, with the animal tracking, really getting connected to the earth, getting your feet on the ground, breathing that fresh air, connecting with the rhythm of the planet. The sacred geometry is same thing. It's, connecting you with both of those, but even more into the cosmological, far out dimension, universal perspective. So, I don't share a lot on all the details of those experiences, but all those extrasensory doorways to different dimensions of perceptions can and will open up when the intent is, with an open, pure heart within the attention of how you're approaching these subjects, which are designed to lead people on their process of awakening, let's just say. They're all designed to be part of that.
Can you tell us one of your experience? Can you tell us one of your experience in the forest when you start seeing that portal, those portals, or those experiences?
Well, in the forest, for me, I would say my dream time experience is probably the stronger connection and opening, around, 3 a.m.ish, and then when the veil, for me at least, is very thin. That's when a lot of things can really start to happen that bring the daytime and the nighttime all together into one, awaking the dream, that can happen. It's beyond the dream. But in the forest, the connection with the forest, where everything comes alive in a new way. Everything has an energetic signature with it. That goes beyond just the label of a name. It has a real impression to it that has a face to it. I remember one series where I would go walking through the forest. Every tree that I looked at, had an engraved face, or a person, or a rock would all of a sudden have an animal carved into the side of it. The whole area was alive, much like maybe Susan Boulay, was that a woman? There's a woman who did a lot of Native American art where it's all, the whole forest is alive with different people and animals all woven throughout, like the background. It can look like that, when you really give yourself over to that, but you have to really immerse yourself into that world.
That is gorgeous. I need to go and check that out. But where I live we have a jungle of cement. So yeah, I miss my mountains. I miss that nature. I believe that is important, that contact, constant contact.
Yeah.
And George, how easy or accepted it is? Well, I know the awakening is happening, and more people are awakening, and more people are learning how to observe and how to listen, how to be in contact with themselves and with the true self. But that is not common yet in the majority of the population.
Mm-hmm.
How many people do you think right now it is opening to learn? Not, I'm talking about art. Many people might want to learn art, how to paint or how to draw, whatever. But to the concept of what it is, the sacred geometry, how many people do you think it is accepting now that new concept for them? That they always have existed, but for them it's new.
Well, I mean, I would say from what I'm observing, on social media or online, of course, that's my interest, so whatever you're interested in, you're going to see more of, because that's, especially the way the algorithms or whatever pumps it through, and your friends tend to have those types of interests in the circles you hang out with. So it seems like everybody's into this. But, if you just look back, like I would look at some, well-known geometers, like Jane 108, for instance. I looked back at his videos to just see his presence in sacred geometry. Like, when did it really start to take off for him? Like, how many people got interested in his work? And it was maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, there was like a real spike in the interest of sacred geometry that I'd seen, at least in his progression, and other geometers. Now, there's been in the culture for a long time, but at least within the past 2 to 3 years, maybe that's because my interest has increased, but I don't think so. I think that there is definitely a rise in the amount of many documentaries or videos or ancient knowledge, occult wisdom, more and more authors, more and more books. Like, this is really coming to more of a head and becoming much more diffused in the broader cultural concept, like with Gaia Channel and things like that, always putting on more and more about sacred geometry. I'd say it's really much greater than it had 10 years ago.
Just to clarify, obviously I'm talking about the Western society, because obviously if we talk about the Buddhists and the monks, they do beautiful mandalas in sand, and as soon as they finish, they let it go. But that is a different culture. I'm talking more in the Western, obviously.
That's what I was addressing, at least from my small window of what I could see around me here in North America.
Yes, that is good. People are starting to learn. So do you have you mentioned that it's 8 weeks that people work with you in your classes, correct? And what subjects you have in there, so like that?
Well, I got one other opportunity. I have the Patreon set up, which is it's not as intense. It's a small Patreon group. I have a few people in it right now, and I think it's a really nice platform because I meet with the group once a month, part of the membership. And throughout the month, I produce a written contents because I'm working on a book, and there's some sacred geometry steps in there, and I do a video describing the drawing. Like if you're a beginner and you're wanting to do sacred geometry, it's kind of like I'm walking you through this, and then also meeting once a month. And that's, like $16 a month or something like that, which is a really user-friendly, accessible way to kind of just do sacred geometry and meet with me and another group of geometers who are doing this. So the 8-week course is a little more intense because it's once a week for 8 weeks. And the curriculum is not set in stone. It's more going with the flow of what is where my interests lie as well, and I start off with the basics, get people interested, get them drawing. But then because I'm always interested in discovering new things, I'm always bringing slight adjustments or new models. So I've got people who took it last time who are going to come back again because there's more material that they know that will be interesting. So you can work with different people at different skill levels in that.
Do you have a piece that you can show us that you have done, so like that, for the people that do not understand exactly where?
Yes. Hold on a sec. Let me just get some of the drawings that we did in this notebook. This is the second week we did this one here. This is with this seed of life pattern with the phi ratio golden circles and the geometric form that was in the inside there of the dodecahedron. So that was, one of the drawings we did. We did this tree of life pattern, the classic tree of life pattern, because there's the flower of life, the fruit of life, tree of life.
And so it looks like a little bit of the Kabbalah.
Yeah, that's the Kabbalistic tree of life. So there's a few different interpretations of that. And I did this with the golden ratio circles. Let's see, we did this one. This is one of the crop circle drawings. That was a pentaract. This is like a fifth dimensional structure that's based on 10 and 5 symmetry. So the pentagon is in that. Now, I didn't color these in. You could color them in. We did a nine-pointed star one of the weeks with the same underlying pattern. So I like to work with the same template, for a little bit, and then teach some different things that are within that. And then, some of the colored artwork, that I've done over the years have been, things like this and, all around my walls in my home here are these wood engraved patterns and designs. And I really like building polyhedra. I work with the geometric shapes. So this is a 60-pointed star that is, inside these dodecahedron and icosahedron. So we really work with the platonic solids, because I really work with trying to get my apprentices and Patreon group to really visualize the forms that are in these drawings as the three-dimensional structures that, are like nested within inside one another. So, you have a icosahedron, which represents the water element here, with the stellated dodecahedron inside, and these really expand and grow off one another. So, I've got tons and tons of little props, that I bring out, and then we do the drawings of these. And the drawings that I like to do are real representations, 2D of these. So you can basically build the form from the drawing, or it's an accurate representation of those. So that's really my thing. I just really am into doing the forms, that are in the geometry, because they're really like a template, for these geometric designs and constructions. And then however whatever the interest of the particular apprentice or student, they embellish that and find new patterns or create it or color it in however they want. I believe sacred geometry has like a little seed for each of us that once we give it a little bit of water, it's going to take you in your own direction, in your own interest. And what I'm realizing for myself is I just now trust that process, that once you give a little water to an individual who's getting started with this, they're set on their own journey. Sometimes it's just overcoming, like, how do I use the compass? How do I do the straight edge? How do I do that? And once you do that and you know you can do that, well, you're off and running, you're drawing circles, you're connecting the dots. And then that little seed just opens up for that person on their own. So that's really what I try to inspire in the apprenticeships is, share my interest and passion and enthusiasm, and then watch it emerge in them.
That is beautiful. Sorry.
No worries.
Do you exhibit your work? Do you in galleries, or what do you do with your work?
My gallery is pretty much around my home. I put it up on the walls. I have it in notebooks. I have tons of little geometric forms, big ones. I really haven't done gallery shows. I'm always posting things on Facebook. I have a new geometers Facebook group, KNEW Geometers. That's a great way to be with another group, a small group. I don't know, I've got maybe 60 people in there or something. They're posting their images. I'm always sharing images that I draw in there. But that's really like my gallery, is I just try to put it out through those social media networks, just so that more people can see it through that medium, especially over the past 2 years.
Believe me, I have windows already covered with paintings, and it can get so much, when we are. That's why I was asking you if you exhibit them and so forth, because I am a true believer that when I paint, I know they go in layers. You can see a fish, let's put it like that. But behind the fish, there's something else that is going to go to the subconscious of the human being. There are people that are going to see it. There are people that are just going to see a fish. Mm-hmm. But there's something behind that fish. There's symbology, and there's a lot of stuff, colors and so forth, that I wanted to go to the subconscious of the human. Mm-hmm. And when I exhibit my work, they buy it or they don't, but they observe it. Mm. It did my work, even if they don't buy it, and it doesn't matter if they buy it or not. And that's why I was asking you.
Well, yes, that's probably something I'll explore in the future. But I would say with the sacred geometry, for sure, there is that subconscious element that's penetrating into people's deeper place within them. There's some little seed, like I'm saying, that's contained with that drawing that may start to ignite, and I believe that that's what these drawings are around, is that they carry such a root resonance to something harmonic or frequency that we're going to resonate with at some point in life, that can open up that part blossoming or flowering. You might not have to draw sacred geometry, you might never do that, but it starts to set you on a path of a more spiritualized growth, and that's how this sacred geometry can be associated just in and around us. It's always used in logos, let's say, for yoga, or, it's always some little geometric pattern somewhere. And there's some attraction to that, that it says, oh, I want to check that out. And that leads you down this path. So it plays a part, even if it's in the background. But this is really bringing it to the forefront of your consciousness. And when you do that, then you're really interacting with those forms, rather than, you're really starting to understand and relate to them in a whole new way. And that's, not only exciting for the mind, but also deeply exciting and fulfilling on a spiritual journey, for sure.
Well, the one that you showed us about the Kabbalah is a very profound study that I don't know at all. But I always been attracted to learn more about that, because there are layers and layers and layers in the Kabbalah, and you can see it in the sacred geometry. It was there, and it's always been there since the beginning of time. The sacred geometry for all of us, and if we see it or not, it is still there. And it is great to have a great teacher to teach you about that. Thank you, George, for your service.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you so much for having me. All right, much love, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for seeing us. And it was my pleasure. Thank you, George. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
In the great outdoors, forever free. Sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth around you. From a distance you can tell. You and me were meant to be.